Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is the M&A Playbook for logistics leaders with my friend Spencer Tenney. How's it going, Spencer?
Going great, Joe. Good to be with you.
It's always nice to talk to you. Spencer, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
I'm Spencer Tenney, CEO of the Tenney Group out of Franklin, Tennessee. Tenney Group, we're an industry-specialized merger and acquisition advisory firm that's been dedicated to transportation logistics since 1973.
Very nice. So today's title, the M&A Playbook. M&A stands for mergers and acquisitions for anyone who's not doing that day to day. So what do you, when you say you're doing mergers and acquisitions, what's the actual business? Are you working with the sellers? Are you working with the buyers?
About 80% of our practice involves helping, in many cases, founders navigate, prepare for, and execute on the sale of their companies. And most of the time, those companies are somewhere between, call it 20 to 300 million in top line revenue. And then that second part of our practice is helping buyers, in many cases, who are highly prolific, very experienced acquirers, but for whatever reason, maybe it's because they have an urgency around a specific deal profile that they need help getting to, or maybe there's a specific expertise that we bring to the table, but we're trying to help them round out and provide some complementary support to help them maximize their overall M&A strategy.
So when you say specialized industry, I know you work with freight brokerages. Do you also work with warehouse owners, like warehousing and fulfillment
We do
companies?
do pretty much anything across the supply chain, whether it be truckload, freight brokerage, warehousing, freight tech. And that's what we love. We love helping folks and learning how to bring more value to those that are part of this ecosystem.
Now, I've talked to you before about this, both offline and online. One of the, I think, real challenges is if you're start a freight brokerage, I'll use that as an example, and you've grown it over 20 years and you've got the majority of your net worth wrapped up in that. And then you say, oh, okay, something's coming up. Maybe you're not as healthy as you once were, or maybe you're uninspired, or I know somebody said to me one time, probably you, the 3Ds impact selling: death, divorce, and disease. They're all sad moments.
Yes, we do accept some assignments around those specific conditions. Ideally not, though. I think what we're really trying to do,
You want to be healthy.
I think the main, like the spirit of our whole firm is obviously the industry is, our industry is not like other industries. I think everyone can agree with that. There's definitely some unique qualities, and that carries over.
We're all good looking and all smart and
That's
funny.
right.
It's just, I don't know how that happened.
It's just all in one industry. No, but there's some very specific uniqueness around transferring ownership as well. And be it just with the nuances and the technical elements of this industry, or sometimes it's just understanding that this is a global market for who buyers are and why they would have a strategic rationale for investing in your business. And so it's just important to understand what does maximizing a deal in this space require, and what are the tools around the table to actually go execute. And that's what we're constantly trying to enhance to bring more value to our clients.
Yes. And if you're an expert freight broker or an expert in warehousing and fulfillment, and you built your career and built a great company and a great team, that's all fantastic. But what you probably aren't an expert in is exits. You don't get many exits. You don't get many shots at this. So I think a lot of us read the business magazines, go, oh, this guy's successful exit. This guy's successful exit. Most people get one shot.
It's true. It's true. And to be fair, I think that many of our clients, they're exceptional negotiators. They have great finance minds. When we're talking about transferring ownership and trying to have unique influence over what that's going to look like, and also trying to address a variety of different, very complex goals in parallel while continuing to grow the business. That's a large and broad objective to try to do all by yourself. And so I think what we're trying to do is to provide very specific expertise to help manage the actual workload associated with that, bring unique optionality through our network and through our buyers. But sometimes, like I said, this is a complicated industry. There's a myriad of ways for a deal not to close. Part of what our clients are hiring us is to, when they get a deal and when they're getting close to the money, they want to make sure that they insulate their success as much as possible. They have the greatest problem-solving team at the table helping them get paid. And I think that's really what we're trying to do.
And you do this every day. They do it once in a lifetime. I think that's why you hire experts. Anyway, we'll get back to it. I think when we get into it, we'll talk about the trends going on in the M&A market, in the industry in general. We'll talk about what you do for sellers, what you do for buyers, and what we should all be looking for. But first, tell us a little bit about you, Spencer. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined this Tenney Group, because I know you joined your dad's biz.
I did. I did. So I grew up in Arlington, Texas, just there in Dallas, Fort Worth. Like many Cowboys fans today, I'm very disappointed in what I just learned about
Oh, Micah
Micah
Parsons, yeah.
Parsons. That hurts. That
Come
hurts.
on, Jerry.
But yes, just been taking a beating as a Cowboys fan the last 30 years. But I grew
I'm
up.
a Lions fan, I get it.
It's hard not to be a Lions fan these days. I
We're
really
getting
I
there.
like
We're
Dan
getting there.
Campbell and what they're doing. He's a good guy. But grew up in Texas and ultimately I went to the University of Texas in Austin and had a great experience there. When I left, we were talking about this offline. When I left school, I initially started working with my dad, and it lasted about 2 years. And I remember this moment where my he's a very good salesperson. And that comes with the territory of being in mergers and acquisitions. And I was like, I need you to help. I need you to teach me what you do because I'm just kind of out here getting my rear end kicked every day, and I'm just making it up. And he said, I don't know how to do what I do. I just do it. And so that was shortly thereafter I gave my resignation. I was like, I need to get involved in an organization who can teach me something. So I actually have a foundation to be professional at something. And so shortly thereafter, I went into the medical staffing arena and had the great opportunity to work with 1,000 employee firm where there was structure, there was processes, and it was just a great opportunity to learn about leadership and also former sales training and a host of different other skills that I took away from that experience. So that was in there for a good bit. And that was very formative as far as pretty early in my professional career that would kind of shape a lot of things later on. Ultimately, after a few other areas, I went into music publishing. I was a longtime musician, so that took a turn in that area, and that was a way to flex a creative muscle, kind of in a business way as well. And then ultimately, the one thing I couldn't get away from, Joe, was this thrill of helping somebody realize the American dream. And I watched my dad do it as I grew up. I got a little taste of it right out of college. And after experience a variety of different things, nothing is better than helping somebody that has their entire life's work and they're so close to realizing everything that they've built and to be able to provide a little guidance in that one moment where somebody that's really special needs it. I just couldn't shake it. I just wanted to be a part of it. And so once I actually had some training and some experience and honestly an appreciation for how special that work was, I couldn't wait to get back in it and then been doing it ever since.
Now you live in the Nashville areas. Did you move there for the music biz?
I did. So that's how I went out here and as a songwriter and music publisher. And that's how I met my wife, who was a singer songwriter. And what an amazing journey that's been and being a part of this community that's highly creative and wonderful people, super generous. And it's been an amazing place to kind of lay down roots and have a family and have just amazing neighbors and cool people.
Yeah, it's funny because Nashville went from a kind of very niche. Yeah, it's just country music. I was never a big country fan, more kind of rock and roll, but now it's like the center of rock and rolls down there. And it feels like anybody who's a musician just ends up down in Nashville now. And I would say more so than New York or LA, and they might have shown up in the past.
It is. It's a huge draw now, and it's getting a little too big for its britches, in my opinion. That's why I stay down in Franklin, just south. It's a little more family friendly.
No, I know I heard somebody say this. I'm trying to think of the artist. He said, I wanted to be a singer-songwriter, and he said, I moved down to Nashville. He goes, but it's not cheap like it used to be. He goes, it's super expensive to live down there. He goes, it used to be you could live down there, live cheaply, and look for a break. And Joel Simpson.
Oh,
Yeah, and I think he moved out of there, moved to Kentucky, and he said, I wanted to be there. It was a little expensive when I was starting out. Beautiful place.
it is a great place. A buddy of mine was Sturgill Simpson's attorney for a long time, and he would tell me his one of his prized possessions was this plaque, kind of like a trophy thing that Sturgill Simpson gave him for as a thank you for negotiating some of his record deal contracts, and it was filled with some expletives about how great he was as an attorney. Like So,
By the way, I believe Sturgill Simpson was a railroad guy for many years,
really?
and
I didn't know that.
I don't think he made the turn into the music business till he's 40 years old. And I remember, I think I heard him on Joe Rogan years ago talk about that and say, "Yeah, I thought this is it. I got him one last shot." And he goes, "I had a good job in the railroad," and he said, "I've been there a long time." So, as I mentioned, all the talented people are from this space.
It's unavoidable, Joe. So
Exactly. Anyway, let's talk about what's going on in the environment of transportation, logistics, warehousing, and all the freight tech. What's happened? So I'll just say it this way. COVID was good for business, not good for all of our families, obviously, not good for the country, not good for the world, but good for the freight business. And then what happened?
right. I don't know what the month is now, but it's by far the longest freight recession on record. I look at it this way from an M&A standpoint, we're coming off 5 straight quarters of quarter over quarter increase in deal volume, which is exciting. But the way
Is that just your company or is that all companies?
no, that's global M&A activity according to Capital IQ. And so that's encouraging, but I think like what the context for that is it's really with one or maybe one and a half tied behind our back because we've got compressed rates across the board. It makes it very difficult for sellers to go advocate for themselves and get deals done. We have, of course, the disruption of Trump administration's tariffs, which has isolated entire sectors within this industry that have not been able to transact.
A lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty slows the market down, doesn't it?
So to me, what's interesting about that, you have all that going on, but yet we still have 5 straight quarters with increased M&A activity on a global level. And so what that tells me is that there continues to be a significant amount of pent up inventory of M&A activity that is yet to be unleashed. And so we're just waiting for basically any help from the freight market, any amount of stabilization in terms of the tariff conversations, which we're getting some progress there, but there's still work to be done. But it just goes to show that there's a tremendous amount of, and as we were talking about online, there's still announcements, what seems like daily, whether it be huge things in terms of freight tech or AI or what have you. But even in this last month, we did a deal. It's a 9-figure deal. It's with an asset deal with an agnostic private equity group coming up as a platform investment, which is very interesting based on what's going on right now. And so for me, it was a huge encouragement I think this should be an encouragement to all your listeners and people in this space. When private equity groups come in and they do deals and they don't already have an existing platform in this space, they do an extensive amount of research. In many cases, they'll pay upwards to $1 million or more to do the sufficient amount of study and research through third parties to what they're doing is, hey, is this the right investment for us right now? They want to make sure that they have the right understanding of the trajectory of the industry's health that they're investing in. So the fact that this group could come in and stroke a check for, like I said, 9 figures and feel comfortable about where our space is headed, to me, I think that's a great encouragement right now in terms of what's happening.
And so when you say platform company, what you mean, and I want to get your 2 cents on this, is I'm going to give the layman's version first. The platform company for a private equity company, their plan is this is the platform and we're going to buy other companies. So they might paid a decent multiple for that first company and they say this is the big fish that now we're going to add a whole bunch of little fish and make a really big fish out of this one. And I think usually what they're looking for is after that is to pay less multiples on all the little fish compared to the big fish. And when I say multiples, it's against, I don't know, EBITDA or earnings. You tell me.
No, I think that's right. Generally, a platform like the initial investment attracts the highest valuation, be it the multiple or what have you, for multiple reasons. One, it's typically the largest. So they're valuing it because of the size. It's typically the best performing of any of the company that they're going to buy. It has the most institutional knowledge, capability, probably the best tech, by far
Less risk.
the best. So what it is, it's the foundation that they're going to build everything on. And so the way that the private equity group, they're going to roll up, consolidate a variety of different players, not just in this specific deal, just as a general rule. What they're trying to do is roll in, capture as many synergies as possible, pay market price. They're going to try to get the best deal as possible. But typically, compared to the platform investment, the deals that they're acquiring can't command anywhere close to what the platform investment was to begin with. So it's not like really they're like trying to get it on the cheap. It's just the realities that deal can't and won't attract that type of, so they're going to pay what market is. Now, on the blend, so that's going to reduce their all-in investment multiple. And so when they exit, they'll get their return on the arbitrage of the total.
Yeah. And that's what private equity companies do over and over again. And by the way, they've gotten a lot of hate lately in the last, I don't know, every once in a while you hear a comedian or some influencer say something about it. But it's letting people exit their businesses, and it's building bigger businesses. Typically, when you look at companies like what we saw with Brad Jacobs, I don't know if you consider that private equity necessarily, but with XPO, he built XPO, and from it came GXO and RXO, and now he's on to the next industry, I think, distribution. Nobody got hurt there. It was company. They built a juggernaut, and then they ended up splitting it in three ways, but it's still, each of those companies is a great competitor.
Yeah. And I would say this, I think I've had the privilege to work with some wonderful private equity groups. I think there's some great ones that invest in our space regularly. And I think they understand this industry. I think they do. I think that they treat people well, but I'm in no way vouching for the behaviors of every private equity group. There's certainly some
Right.
that
It's a
don't,
big industry.
that do not operate above board. And I think that's why it's important for sellers when they're exiting that private equity is certainly one type of buyer that they can exit through. But it's important to have a variety of options to choose from, to do your homework, to ask other parties, or at least ask other parties that they've transacted with, and just find out what they experienced. And it's all about getting a fit that you're comfortable with. And ultimately, I'm a big believer of extreme ownership. It's on the sellers to do their own diligence of who they're transacting with. Ultimately, only they can put pen to paper and do the deal.
Yeah, and this is, I'm not being salesy for you here, but this is why you hire somebody who does it every day, because they say, this is the kind of partner you're looking for. Let me connect you with the right guys, as opposed to letting you get in a deal that is going to not give you the maximum value. Anyway, we talked about this freight recession, and hopefully that's ending soon. It can't last forever. What we've seen during that time, our friend Kevin Hill over at Brush Pass Research, I'm going to interview him next week. I think at the peak, we had 30,000 freight brokers, and I'm sure that, I'm not going to talk about the trucking market right now, but I'm sure that it shrunk right along with the freight brokerage market from 30,000 players to 25,000 players. But we're seeing fewer and fewer companies go out of business in net every month. So there's some new brokerages, and there's some that are going away. We saw a big surge during COVID, and then they're slowly leaving the field. I think the same things happen with trucking. I'm sure people have let go some trucks. Some companies went away. Eventually, we'll get back to that supply and demand, that where there's more demand for the services than there is available. Maybe that. And I've also talked to, I think, Jason Miller over at Michigan State. He's a big believer that you need an external factor in addition. And sometimes it might be new housing starts, which we start to see March, April, when you start seeing a lot of flatbed movement with lumber and building materials moving. Be nice if there was a big boom here that would help us get out of the doldrums. That rate compression makes it really difficult, though, because we also have, in addition to the rate compression, a lot of people have been buying technology for years now with the hope that it's going to save me some money, make us more efficient, make us more effective. And by the way, frankly, just keep up. In terms of visibility tools, that you say, oh, we're not going to spend on Project 44 or Macro Point. No, you have to. It's table stakes. I think all sorts of, I call them the killer apps, the green screens of the world, I just mentioned Project 44, Macro Point, those just became table stakes. But now all of a sudden, in addition to all of the killer apps, we have maybe the ultimate killer app, which is AI. And I think we've been using it, but now it's becoming more and more, what are you doing now? And I think there's a lot of the sense of everyone's doing something but me. How does that impact the market?
What's interesting is I've probably talked to maybe a dozen different freight brokerages over the last 30 days, all of which have materially reduced their headcount within their organization, and primarily through AI related type technology. or finding ways to get efficient. But even with those dramatic headcount reductions, that the margins still are struggling. Still, it was just a remarkable thing to have that type of impact, to be able to to reduce that level of fixed expenses, but to have so much rate compression that you can't produce healthy margins. And so to me, number one, to your point, like this is table stakes. Just to be able to even have a chance, you have to really be thoughtful about capitalizing on all the available technologies that are available while not getting lost or overwhelmed in the litany of available things that you can do right now. And those things are increasing in their value and just the quality every single day. So I think part of the deal right now is just there's only so many hours in a day. It's just folks just trying to figure out what are the right types of investments in my freight brokerage that are actually going to produce a return that I can bank on later on as when it comes to an exit. And I think that it's very exciting right now. But to your point, I do think that if we can get a help one or two interest rate reductions, as the Fed is signaling might be possible for the first time in a while, that then we do start to fire up the construction industry and the home building industry. And I think that'll be a significant impact on what we're currently experiencing.
Yep. I know this is not going to save us in the short run, but I saw something with Mark Andreessen, and I've been texting. I'll text it to you. If I can, I'll put it in the show notes. And it was Mark Andreessen, who's the founder of Mosaic, which he sold to Netscape. It's basically the first browser. And now he works Andreessen Horowitz. He's a venture capitalist. And he was talking about the repositioning of supply chains. And one of the reasons we're doing these tariffs is because we're trying to bring back some of the manufacturing jobs that have moved overseas in the last generation. And he said, I'm not so much worried about bringing back the old jobs. I'm more interested in the future jobs, which he said is going to be cars and drones and robots. And there's a lot of people who think robots will be the biggest industry in the history of the world. And he said, obviously, funding coming from both coasts and tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of jobs in the US. And he said this will be the third and fourth industrial revolution. He sees it as just this incredible boom that doesn't pay tomorrow's bills. We got to get going here before we got to survive the downturn before we can worry about this glorious new future.
Yeah. No, I do think that there's even what we see on the political landscape. I do think that the Trump administration is attuned to that. They understand that AI requires enormous amount of energy, and if we're gonna be competitive in AI in all things related, because the thing about these like huge data centers and the things that are going on there, they require hundreds of thousands of loads of materials to be moved. And so to me, this is a great opportunity to not only boost our economy, but to provide a tremendous demand in the T&L space. But so I think what we're seeing, and it's not happening overnight, but you're seeing an administration that's attuned to that. It's trying to attract the investment to the states while also unleashing red tape on the energy industry to allow us to fully capitalize on the available opportunity, not just compete, but win. And so I think all those things are aligned with the interest of our industry.
Yeah. And by the way, I know that Trump is such a polarizing figure. I always want to point this out. We had the CHIPS Act under President Biden. So this is not a Democratic or Republican thing. The United States is, regardless of party, absolutely convinced we need to bring back manufacturing and that production back to this country. And we had a thought, and I was part of this, was that we could move the manufacturing out of the country, and the smart work, the intelligent work, the design and the engineering we'll do here, and we'll outsource this to the manufacturing to lower cost countries. The challenge, I think, is now, and we learned this, is that the people doing the manufacturing and the production got really good at manufacturing production and started moving upstream into the engineering, and now they're really good at manufacturing and the engineering. And this is the history of the world. You learn some lessons, but I think what we're going to see is a tremendous boom. And again, it's not a Trump thing. It's not a Biden thing. It's a United States thing. And I think it's going to be great, but we got to get there first. Anyway, let's switch gears. I know you work with sellers. So that's 80% of the people who you work with want to sell their businesses. So give me a description of the average guy coming, not a name, obviously, but what type of industry are they in? And what's their profile? What do they look like?
No, for instance, we just went under contract with I think it's about a top line freight brokerage. It's around 55 million top line revenue. And part of what was appealing about this right now is they have some insulation from some of these macroeconomic issues that are suppressing margins. So that a very high performing company that differentiates from the competition right now. So there was high demand for this business and it went under contract very quickly. And so that deals
So you said this before on my podcast that we have to differentiate our businesses. What do you mean by that?
means is like usually if there's the type of work on a freight brokerage that maybe there's some type of moat around it because if maybe it's because they're doing technical moves that not everybody wants to do, and so their margins are protected consequently. And so when there is a some type of capability or unique capability that allows you to do something that other people can't either and do it in a time frame in a level of quality that other people can't or can't do it easily, that just allows you to insulate margins from the pressures that are affecting all companies on a macro level. And so what we're seeing from an M&A standpoint, like it's not just in this environment, this is true of everything. Like pretty much over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a huge uptick of smaller type transactions that had some specialized expertise that was protected against large market issues. And then, so that was just a very attractive thing for other larger acquirers to pick up new revenue that they felt, hey, it may not be a huge transaction, but it is at least I can count on those margins moving forward. I might not be able to grow it.
They're not in that 12% range on the margins. They're more 15, 17.
Yeah, or 20 or 22. And
Okay,
so,
all right.
and it's, but yeah, it's very easy to stick out when you're performing at that level and people are happy to pay for it.
Yeah, and I think I've talked to you before, so I feel like this is the cheat code here. But it also might, if there's a company that says, hey, we're really good at automotive, and another larger company says, we want to get into automotive, we can start from scratch. We have that money, but why not buy somebody who's established and really good at it, has the locations in the automotive hubs? Boom, it's a nice fit.
Yeah. Another profile would say, is I mentioned this liquid bulk hauler that we did recently, and this is a 20 million plus type EBITDA company. And part of, from a profile standpoint, they can draw an audience easily. It's a high performing company, even for private equity groups, that's going to get their attention, even if they don't even like transportation. But I think part of the draw was this is a group that understood that we transacted with probably 10 of the top 12 buyers in the last 3 years. And so like they knew that we'd worked with people that are going to have interest. They knew that we had visibility on their playbook, how they operate, how they negotiate. So all that intel was going to be valuable to their process as we went forward. And it just made it just a no-brainer for them to have that level of intelligence, research, relationships, just to help them have every advantage that they could to go get something done.
Yeah, so if I'm a seller, one nice thing about working with a merger and acquisition company like yours is a lot of the buyers, and you know what they're looking for. You say, this guy, you're a good fit, or you're not a good fit. And maybe there's some changes you can make to become a better fit. And I've said this before on my podcast, probably when I was talking to you, is we should be differentiating our business, looking to find ways to become the very best at something anyway, because that's where the margins are at, is saying, I specialize in cold chain and we're really good at it. And we're maybe in a geographic area where you say, we are the we're the best at cold chain, and we're the best at cold chain in the Northeast. And then when some larger cold chain company says, hey, we're looking to expand in the Northeast, you're a perfect fit. Now, it's not to say you can have to turn down every other piece of business, but you have to be known for something, and you have to be, it's probably a better fit to say we're a cold chain company in the Northeast is to say, we do everything. We do a little bit of cold chain. We got flatbeds. We do heavy haul. We do, you name it. We're the best at everything. You're like, I don't know. Nobody's believing that.
No, it's interesting. We talk about this a lot when there's companies that have, especially with freight brokerages. I've had several conversations like this where they have carved out like this niche thing that they do at a high level and they have excellent margins, but we're all susceptible to ego. and, hey, I just got to get the business up here, or I need to be exiting at X amount, or whatever the case is. And so they begin to take on new revenue types that are less specialized, and it really begins to water down the overall product. It becomes less special at that point. And so,
Yeah, and I've experienced this, Spencer. I remember being in a firm, and I remember we had this opportunity, and it was such low margins, just ridiculous. I'm embarrassed to say, but I mean, but it would be the volume was so high. And by the way, I'm an automotive guy. I can tell you automotive is a lot like that sometimes, where we'll give you tremendous volumes, but the margin is super low. This is why the industry falls down like a house of cards during bad times. But it's very tempting because you go, oh my God, the top line growth. And you're like, what about the bottom line growth? Well, not so good. But the top line growth is so exciting that it, to your point, maybe gets in your ego a little bit.
no, and I think that what's important is, I'm not saying don't do it. I just think as a best practice, maybe we'll talk about some of this, but I think what I see, particularly freight brokerages that are very serious about building and protecting business value, before they're making like material commitments and capital investments to their companies or changing their business models, they're doing some homework to make sure that they're not creating any unforced errors that are in conflict with what they're trying to do later down from an exit standpoint. So I think when folks are relying on resources that can provide some intel specific to that credibly, that's just a good practice and good stewardship moving forward as you're making important decisions for your business and making sure that everything checks out.
Yep. I think it's interesting when you talk to somebody like you about what we should be doing in our businesses, and you use the term moat. We should all be building a boat. You also use differentiate a few times, and you said specialized expertise. And I think this is really useful because I think the tendency, especially in a down market, is to just say, oh my God, just anything, get some business in here. I don't care if it's low margin. I don't care if it's not what we do on a regular basis. And maybe that's an okay thing to keep the doors open. I think a lot of us have done stuff like that. But I think you still have to have that North Star, which means we're going to become the very best distribution group in Texas or in Idaho or wherever you're at.
I'm reminded of some sound advice I heard from a former client. This guy's name, he's a Chicago guy. I bet this is 20 years ago. His name's Buff Blackler. It sounds like a movie, right? Buff Blackler. He's 85 years old when he sold his business, highly profitable, super active. And he says, Spencer, let me tell you some advice. This will change your life. He says, I would rather do nothing and get nothing than do something and get nothing. And look, and that's how I feel about a lot of these.
Sound advice.
No, and it sounds like you're saying the same thing. I was like, what did you say? Say it one more time. But I think this is really good advice for folks right now where the market's not helping you. And so some of this is just like when there's no play, there's no play. And so sometimes it just makes sense to strategically downsize in a way so that you aren't putting yourself in a situation where you are producing and multiplying a lot of non-revenue producing activity that's actually diminishing the value of your company. And so I think that the great thing about freight brokerage is it's very easy to ratchet up quickly as market conditions improve, but there's no need to eat these losses right now if you have the ability to manipulate that model.
I think there's also, I know I've had this experience where you say, okay, it's not quite the margin that we want, but we're going to keep working on it. We're going to find different carriers and we're going to lower that price. And while you're doing that, you're not chasing a good customer and the better fit. And I think we've all experienced that where you say, okay, we're not making the kind of margin we should on this. Is there anything we can do to become more efficient internally, to reduce our cost per load? And by the way, the same thing's happening in the warehousing. I talked to the warehousing guys quite a bit lately. They've come under a lot of margin compression also. And there was a lot of new entrants into the business and they all took on small customers. A lot of them, the newer ones did. And I talked to a lot of them. I talked to them offline too. And I always say, be careful of the small customers. And then a year later, they're like, oh, we had to get rid of 10 customers. They were too small. They were costing us money. But it keeps you busy all day, doesn't it?
No, that's the trouble with being busy, Joe. No, honestly, I think that's just I think one of the most helpful things about being in a challenging cycle like this is that it forces you to be honest about who you are and who your customers are. And the reality is some of these folks, you don't need their business and they're actually a detriment. And so I think one of the most empowering things that I think people do both for themselves and as part of creating value is just firing customers that are not aligned with the business that you aspire to be.
Yeah. Yeah, by the way, I've had that in the past where somebody says, "You should consider offering something for this price," and it's much lower, and you're like, "Oh, okay." And it's a thoughtful thing that they're giving you. They're not it's not it's coming from the right place, and then you go, "Oh, okay, my friend said this." And were they right? No, maybe not. But the tendency in the down market is to say, "Oh, I just got to survive, fight for another day." And not always the right thing. Anyway, let's switch gears. Let's talk about buyers. So you also work with buyers. Talk about what they look like and what they're looking for from Tenney Group.
Usually when an experienced buyer comes to us with help, it's usually because they're having trouble. Maybe they have 5 different types of profiles that they're trying to work on acquiring, and maybe there's one within their 5 that they just either don't have the sufficient resources to go pursue aggressively, or maybe there could be a relationship. Maybe there's a known target, but they just said, "Hey, this is a long-time relationship. It's too sensitive. Can you go start the conversation confidentially and to protect our relationship. So if it doesn't get legs, no one's the wiser. That we can just move along, we can. So it's usually something around that there's a lot of the experienced buyers, they don't need technical help in how to do deals. That's not really the issue. Most of the time it's a sourcing issue where they don't have the network or there's some type of relationship interference that could prevent the other person from engaging constructively. And so that's the advantage that we bring to the situation to bring speed and execution in an area where there's just a gap.
So you're the insulation. You're the one saying, "Hey, in a perfect world, would you be interested in blank if somebody like that was out there?"
Right.
Do you like Tommy kind of likes you? Do you like him?
It's not that far from it, but yeah, that's how it goes. And then for some folks, it's just a lot of folks other maybe they have a lot of resources around their acquisition efforts and they're just not getting results and they need to have a different look and a different approach and they want to try.
And they know you work with mostly sellers, so they know the market. Now, are those guys who come to you, are they private equity companies or are they big warehousing companies?
It's a little bit of both. It's I mean, some of it are the most private equity backed strategics that they're trying to do as much acquiring as they possibly can, and but some of it's more national strategics, and they know how to do deals. But
Wait, what do you mean when you say strategics? What do you mean by that?
I just mean someone that's already has some type of platform in the transportation logistics space. So they're not investing in the space for the first time. They're trying to bolt on to something that they already have.
Okay, so they already got a platform company and now they're looking for 5 other companies to add to that.
Potentially, yes. And what they might be hiring us for is if they're just not getting sufficient results as fast, and so they either need more resources or they just need a different approach. But basically, they need more results, and so that's why they would be hiring us.
You think about, I can't speak for warehousing because I don't know those numbers, but it just since I see Kevin Hill posted, there's 30,000 freight brokers, now there's 25,000. And I think 3,000 are the bigger dogs, the 22,000 are the smaller companies. And I think it's hard to know all those guys, right? And someone like you say, "Yeah, I got them in my database. I understand what this industry is." You're at the conferences probably every other week these days. And speaking of which, we'll both be at the Intermodal Association North America conference coming up. We'll talk about that again at the end, but that's coming up September 15th through the 17th out in Long Beach.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, let's wrap this bad boy up. I'm going to summarize what we talked about, then I'm going to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Spencer Tenney, and the name of today's topic is the M&A Playbook for Logistics Leaders. And M&A means mergers and acquisitions, and that's what they do over at the Tenney Group. They advise buyers and sellers on mergers and acquisitions. Spencer, first we talked about the trends in our business, which is post-COVID, we've been in recession. It's really compressed margins. It's made life very difficult. We've also had a lot of concerns with cargo theft and freight fraud and cybersecurity, so that's forced a little bit of spending, a little more concerns. We also have technology like AI coming in, and you said some of the better players are starting to use AI to reduce headcount and still struggling to get the margins that they want. I think this might be, even when the market changes, I think the margins will be under pressure as the best players are getting more from less with using AI and other technologies. You talked about M&A being pretty solid and moving along for 5 quarters, but slowing down. And part of the reason that might be slowing down is concerns with the tariffs, kind of uncertainty in the market, making everybody sit on their hands for a minute. Now, next we talked about you represent a lot of sellers, 80% of your customers. And you talked about if you're a seller that you need to be making yourself different and better. Use terms like moat, build a moat, differentiate, specialized expertise, whether it's a niche geographically or a niche in a certain space. Get nichey. What the niches are, the riches are in the
Yeah, I've
niches.
seen that.
And last but not least, you talked about buyers. You're working with buyers who are coming into our industry struggling to find exactly the right fit, or maybe they want insulation so that you go and be the intermediary, provide that confidentiality that they need so they don't ruffle feathers or change the market. Anyway, enough of my blather. Put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic, Spencer Tenney.
I would say this is one of the most fascinating times in our industry in history. I think that the key to be able to be in control and to enhance all of your available strategic options, you got to have the right team around you. And there's a lot of advisors that should be at the table, but no matter what you're doing right now, having an M&A advisor as part of those strategic discussions just enhances the quality of your ability to make informed decisions. That's number one as an encouragement. But I also just want to encourage folks that deals are getting done. And I'm seeing a variety of folks that are expanding their capabilities via acquisition versus trying to build their own capabilities. And I think that right now there's tremendous amount of pressure on a lot of folks. And what I would just say is that no matter where you're headed, if you've got good counsel, there's always ways to enhance your position in or out of this industry. So just keep communication going on, keep asking good questions. And like I said, this is what we do. If you have some questions, we would certainly welcome a dialogue with you.
Spencer, we didn't talk about this during the podcast, but I want to talk about it right now before we end this up. The time to get connected with Spencer Tenney and his team is before you're ready to sell. You need a little bit of runway. So build that relationship before you need it. Get some advice before it is time to sell your business. Please elaborate.
I always talk about staying agile, staying educated. And the reason is this is a wonderful industry, but it's also one of the most unforgiving industries on the planet. And so people just have to be very agile about what their next move is going to be because if things change overnight, and I just don't believe that you can get locked into a 3 to 5 year strategy without having regular checkpoints along the way to make sure that you're still aligned with the realities of your business. Having a relationship with an M&A advisor, particularly for us, and we have a whole next month, we're going to be launching what we call Tenney University, which is a whole library of educational tools that are free for folks to begin educating themselves about both buying and selling transportation logistics companies. And it's that type of educational material that it's just going to help empower folks to have more options and to have uncommon influence over what their ultimate exit from this industry is going to look like. And so that's the reason why you want to get started early, because the more educated, the more prepared, the more influence you're going to have over your ultimate outcome.
Right. And again, we didn't touch on it, but there's things that you can do to obviously make your business more attractive. It's going to sell at some sort of multiple. So if you say, hey, kept this extra warehouse, it's not making us any money, but we've owned the space for a long time. If it looks like it's a drain on your cash flow, and that is going to hurt. So you say, oh, it costs us $100,000 a year. If the multiple that you sell it for is 6, 7, 8, that is 6, 7, $800,000 you're not getting. And I bet the other day we spoke on the phone just about real estate. The whole thing. If you need to understand what's going on with your real estate when you sell that business, and people like you understand all the options.
There's just a host of different ways, depending on what you have available, to try to pull levers to help give you the best outcome possible. So there's the more that we know about that in advance can help folks design a strategy that's going to help land on the firmest footing. And to that end, some of that is part of being prepared. Some of it is like having your house in order, and those are all good things. But part of, I would say that's 50% of the deal. The other 50% is being opportunistic and being responsive when there is a buyer that has a very expensive problem that only you can solve. And if you're not in those conversations, that is total consideration to a deal that you're never going to be a part of. And so I think that's the other part of the deal. You got to be a part of these conversations. You got to be in the mix, in addition to taking care of what you can control, which is making sure your house is in order and making sure that you got a plan.
Spencer, I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, a link to your website, any of the links you give me, I'll put in the show notes, including a link to your podcast, The Hot Seat, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. And so people can reach out and say, Spencer, I'm looking for a buyer who has a very expensive problem that only I can fill.
Those are great problems.
So talk about The Hot Seat.
Yeah, so we've been doing the hot seat. We've done over 200 episodes now. And what we're really trying to do is just learn. We bring in subject matter experts from across the transportation and logistics industry spectrum. And then we see where are the intersections with M&A and helping people understand just from a variety of different vantage points, just getting more in command of how M&A works. But also I think these are folks that indirectly help the M&A process because their expertise leads to more efficiency and a business that's more valuable. What we're trying to do is through those experts, just bring more value to our current and future clients, and look forward to you guys tuning in.
I love it. I was on there a while back and it was a blast. Speaking of the hot seat, you're going to be at the Intermodal Association of North America, the Expo, which is September 15th through the 17th out in Long Beach. I'm going to be there too. That is IANA. So some of you might recognize the name Ann Reinke. She was head of TIA. Now she's head of IANA. And you're going to be doing some interviews there for the hot seat. And I'm going to be doing some interviews with the logistics of logistics out there.
Yeah. And there's the thing I like about and I told Ann recently this, is why I think the Intermodal Expo is so important is because it's one of the few events where you're getting a lot of global supply chain leaders, and you're getting some of the great technical thought leadership across the whole globe. And so to have them there and to learn from what they're doing, of course, I'm going to be speaking on M&A while we're there as well. But I'm just very excited to have that concentration of those level of supply chain leaders in one place and hopefully hear some great thoughts from them.
And I believe our friend Chris Jolly is going to do some interviews out there too.
Excellent.
So what other conferences we see you and the fine folks from the Tenney Group at this year?
Ones that we have coming up that I expect to be a part of, just a handful. The IANA, I'll be speaking at the American Trucking Associations, their annual conference in San Diego in October. And another one that I'm excited about later in the year is the Benish Private Equity Investing Firm, which is in New York City. It brings out a who's who as far as who's investing, both as private equity groups, but also your major public and private equity backed strategics. And so it's a great way to wrap up the year and get really good insights from a variety of different acquirers, which helps us take that back and mobilize with our clients as well.
Very nice. Very nice. I know I'm going to be at the Broker Carrier Summit down in Orlando. I think I'm speaking at that one. I have to double check. I'm going to be at IANA, as I just mentioned. I'm going to CSCMP out in Maryland. That's in October. I'm going to the Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Conference here in Michigan, in Plymouth, at St. John's. It's a resort. It's beautiful. That's coming up in September. Where else am I going? Missing one. Oh, of course, I'm going to the Trimble Conference down in New Orleans. Don't want to miss the Trimble Conference. I'll be doing interviews down there too. Anyway, Spencer, thank you so much for taking the time. It is always a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise, Joe. I appreciate what you do, and an honor to be on your show again. It's always a good time.
Thank you so much. We'll have to do it again soon. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward.
You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.